I've read so many books that I've loved, and that includes some amazing series from fantasy and science fiction. Many of these were ones I eased into after a few books, they really got me hooked. But others? Wham! These are ones that had me from book one, chapter one, heck, page one. Which series would these be, you ask? Thanks for joining me. We're here at Fantasy for the Ages, a show where a father and son talk about fantasy, science fiction, and other nerdy things that we enjoy. Today, it looks like a Just Jim episode, but that's not true. I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. But I am here to talk about the book series that absolutely grabbed me right from the beginning. Things that I fell in love with, and no matter what, I was definitely continuing on into these amazing science fiction and fantasy series. There's 20 of these on my list, and I'm looking forward to bringing them to you now. If you enjoy this, don't forget, click that like button. Heck, do it now. You can take it back if you change your mind later. And if you haven't subscribed yet, we sure hope you will. And join us here for all the stuff we keep bringing out on Fantasy for the Ages. So, 20 different science fiction and fantasy series that, yes, grabbed us right from the beginning. 17 of them are mine. Different series that I got into, and either by the end of the first book or, in one case, from the first page, I was completely hooked. I'm going to list those for you, starting at the bottom, work my way up. The ones lower on the list are the ones that they started great and they held me for a while, but later in the series, they maybe weakened. They didn't keep me going. Maybe I haven't even finished. But over half this list, the whole thing has been amazing, and I'll point those out as I go. Now, I've got 17, but this is a top 20 list. How is that? Zach has contributed 3 of these as well. He's got videos of just him up here on the screen that I'm going to drop in here at those appropriate times because I'm putting them into the list where they seem to fit in ranking in the top 20. They weren't ones that grabbed me right off the bat, but they are great series. So I placed them where I think makes sense. And I think you'll understand what I'm saying here now. So let's get to our top 20 and see how many of these you've read and likewise enjoyed, versus how many of these are now going to go on your TBRs. And you're welcome. Number 20. Okay, I'm starting with Zombie Apocalypse. These are books that tend to grab me. Some of them, they're pulp, they're a little trash, but they're a guilty pleasure. But there are a few that are amazing and oh, they hook you. And number 20 is one of those, The Undead World by Peter Meredith. There are 10 novels in this series. It is a completed series. There's also 4 novellas and 2 spin-off series. And that's why I can say it's completed, because it has a definite endpoint. And then there's another successor series after Time Jump, and then there's another one after that. It's a fun tale. It's serious and gritty with little doses of humor speckled throughout. It's an intense ride. None of the books are all that long, and you definitely want to just keep going. But it just slaps you in the face right off the bat, and you're captivated, and you want to read. That's what this is all about. Now, those future series, I've read them all. Everything in this world that Peter Meredith created, but I can't say that they always remain quite as grab you, but they definitely start out strong. And I did finish them. Number 19, The Dragon Riders of Pern by Anne McCaffrey. There are 26 novels in this completed series, and completed's a false word. There could be more written because we're at the point where Anne McCaffrey has passed away, but she has 2 children who are still sporadically adding books, telling untold stories, extending and expanding upon the world of Pern. I have only completed 15 of these books so far. I had intended to push on through to the end, but they don't grab you quite as much when you get further in. You start getting hungry to read other types of things. I'll get back to them for sure, but wow, like the first 11, whoa, so good. And they don't just tank after that. It's just the core story ends, and then we're exploring more, and it doesn't quite have you the same way. But book 1, right off the bat, this one grabs you. Number 18, First Law by Joe Abercrombie. And so, the first book here we're talking about, of course, is The Blade itself. This is the one on my list that grabbed me by page one. I mean, right away, I'm like, wow, because it just drops you right into instant action with a fascinating character and things that are going on that you can't believe you're reading. And it never quits. It's Grimdark by Joe Abercrombie, Lord Grimdark himself on Twitter, and he delivers. There are more to this series. I've only read this initial trilogy. After that, there's 3 standalone novels that are part of this world, and then there is a second trilogy after that. There's also 2 short story collections. So nothing beyond the first trilogy have I read yet, but the first trilogy slams, man. And I've heard the rest is great. It's all on my TBR when I can get to them. Number 17, The Rift War Saga by Raymond E. Feist. This starts out with Magician. That book was split into 2, so a Magician Apprentice and then Magician Master, but I read it as Magician. If you count those as 2 books, then we can say there are 31 novels in the series. At least one of those is actually a novella, but I couldn't remember which one now. There might be 2 or 3 of them that are novellas. And there is one companion book that goes with the Rift War universe. Great series. I have read the entire thing except that companion book. It was a great ride. It spans over a few decades, in world over hundreds of years. But Feist is a master of the fantasy storytelling realm, and if you haven't checked out Rift War, you really should. Number 16, a true classic, Dragonlance by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. Now, to be clear, there's a lot of Dragonlance out there. There's over 100 Dragonlance books. They are not all of this caliber. But we go back to the beginning, the Dragons of Autumn Twilight, and that initial Dragonlance Chronicles trilogy. Yeah, I couldn't read that fast enough. That grabs you right away. You're immersed in such a comfortable Dungeons and Dragons world, which is exactly what it was created as, to help sell Dungeons and Dragons games. But it's so, yes, if you were into that back in the 70s and 80s time frame, I read in the 80s, but I think that stuff really kicked off at the end of the 70s. Fantastic. And you loved reading Chronicles and more. I mean, the second trilogy about the twins was fantastic as well. I've read a number of the things early on in Dragonlance. I have not read anywhere close to all 100 plus books, but I'll pick up a Dragonlance again from time to time.
So for me, one series that did this amazingly was the Night Angel trilogy. Specifically, that's 3 books there, not anything beyond, that Brent Weeks gave us. The Way of Shadows, Shadow's Edge, and Beyond the Shadows. This was awesome in that it was a unique, weird, gritty world. And seeing initially this badass perspective and then immediately moving towards brutality and just injustice, I was upset very quickly and willing to read anything that was coming next. I was in.
Thanks, Zach, for your first entry. Now let me jump back in at number 14, and that would be one that actually Zach and I share. So I'm giving him co-credit on this one. It's Red Rising. The Red Rising saga by Pierce Brown, starting with the novel Red Rising. 6 novels in this series. There is one more coming soon. That's all we know. I'm on book 5. Zach has read the 6 that are out there. I'm loving this story. And right from book 1, I was sucked in. Definitely fits this list. And I love continuing through this series. It's going to be hard when I get to the end of book 6 and then have to wait like the rest of y'all who've already read these. But it's worthy. So worthy. Number 13, The World of Middle-earth. So we start with The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Silmarillion, The Book of Lost Tales, all the stuff that was created masterfully by J.R.R. Tolkien, and some of it brought together and edited by his son Christopher. I mean, this is where modern fantasy all began. We don't have fantasy like we have without The Lord of the Rings, and before it, The Hobbit. I read these early on. I've read them so many times because for a long time there wasn't a lot of other choices. And this was just high fantasy. This was the best. I have not picked these up in a while now, but I can tell you right off the bat, The Hobbit, same thing with The Fellowship of the Ring, grabs you. And you just know you're going to plow through everything you can get your hands on. And that's what I've done. Everything I could get my hands on from Middle Earth, I have read.
Another just instantly grabbing moment is the start of Heroes Die, the first of the books of Acts of Cain by Matthew Stover. Again, it's messed up, but in a really cool, unique way, and then very quickly blows open to something entirely different. And as you realize what's going on in this world very quickly, just that initial premise is so unique and interesting. Not in that it's like the only time anything like this has ever been done, but it combines so many elements of what I love to see in a book that I was just like, yes, let's keep going. Let's see how far down this rabbit hole you're going to take me, because I'm willing to find out pretty much no matter what at this point.
So Zach brought you the Acts of Cain. I haven't read that yet, but it's on my TBR. I should get to it this year. I'm looking forward to that experience. My next one, number 11, is A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. That does indeed still have us bitter, because 7 books should be there. 5 are all we have. They are 5 amazing novels. Give us Winds of Winter. Give us the last book. Dude, do it before you die, please. Otherwise, Brandon Sanderson's going to try to learn Grimdark to finish. We don't want that. We want your books. There is also one companion book that goes with this, The World of Ice and Fire, I believe it's called. I have that. And then there's a couple of spin-off books, such as what the new HBO series is based on, which I didn't put in my prep notes. So, of course, I'm mind blocking on that. But it's amazing. I love that series. So I'm sure that spin-off book was good. But that's number 11. Good stuff. Hooked me right from Game of Thrones, no doubt. Number 10, a big throwback. This is the Thrawn trilogy from now the Legends Star Wars universe, written by Timothy Zahn. There were a lot of books written back in the day after the original trilogy had been out, and they're telling more stories of Luke Skywalker, Han and Leia, Lando Calrissian, Chewbacca, the natural progression of where things would go after that final victory over the Emperor, the Empire, the second Death Star. Because come on, people, that doesn't end the war. There's a lot of ships out there. There's a lot of strength of the Empire still out there. And they've got to deal with this stuff. So, yeah, the Thrawn trilogy was one of those key pieces, and it was so good. I sucked all 3 of these books down as they came out. So, I read the first one, had to wait. Read the second, had to wait. Read the third. But wow, they were really good. Number 9, Arisen by Glenn James and Stephen Michael Fuchs. Here we're jumping back into zombie apocalypse. This is perhaps the most adrenaline rushing, heart pounding, got to consume it as fast as you can zombie apocalyptic series I've ever read. There's 14 novels, 2 novellas, 1 companion book that I haven't read. It's really not necessary. It's kind of a fun little thing based on the sayings of one of the particular characters in the series. So I probably never will read it. But all 14 novels and the 2 novellas are amazing. I will probably read this again at some point. It was such a rush. And again, from the first chapter, you're in. You are hooked. Unless you discover you hate zombie apocalypse literature and you probably never picked it up. And if you did, it was a mistake. Number 8. This one a lot of people love. We're talking The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. We've got 9 novels, numerous novellas and short stories. I read the whole series starting just after the final book came out. And as I went along, I interspersed all of the short stories and novellas just where they fit best for the narrative. That was an amazing experience. Now, the final thing that was published in this whole Expanse series is the entire short story collection. Has the novellas and short stories all put together, which included a final short story novella. I think it was a novella that's right at the end of it. A great finish. a little icing on top of the cake of this series. And I was able to read that because it was out by the time I got through book 9. But again, this is one right away. Book 1, you're in. You've got to keep going, and you know you're going to finish this series because this is a story that needs to be told. I feel like, how do I want to say this? I wish Amazon felt like I did, so they'd finish the series. But apparently they thought only going through book 6 was good enough. Number 7, back to the zombie apocalypse. Oh, sorry, guys. This stuff really hits you when it's done well. And this time I'm going to The Walking Dead by Robert Kirkman. I'm talking about the comics, mostly in black and white format. It's a 193 issue run. And they're incredible. I own them all. I own them in chunks. You can get them in volumes where there's a whole bunch, like a whole season of the comics there. If you've never read them, if all you've seen is some of The Walking Dead on TV, no, you've done yourself a disservice. You need to go read these. And they're like Pringles. Once you have one, you can't stop. You're just going to keep popping them in. So read them all. You're going to love it. Number 6, Zombie Fallout by Mark Tufo. 21 novels and counting. He's still writing. The 22nd book will drop this month, March of 2024. There's also one novella in there, kind of gives some backstory on how all the stuff got started in Zombie Fallout. Of course, if you really love Zombie Fallout, there are some related series that you could read, like Lycan Fallout and Demon Fallout. They're tie-ins to this, and other parallel universe ones like Indian Hill. But you can ignore all that if you want and just read the Zombie Fallout series. It is the creme de la creme, the best of what Mark Tufo's put out there. Yes, Zombie Fallout. Yes, there's zombies, but also vampires and demons and ghosts and little invading alien viruses. And there's just so much packed into this thing and a lot of comedy. It's serious, but keeps the banter and lightness woven in all the way. It's like no other zombie apocalypse series I've ever discovered. It's my favorite by far, and I recommend it to anyone, not just zombie fans. Anyone. Give it a try. If you read book 1 and you hate it, okay, you can stop. But you might not hate it, and then I've done you a big favor. Number 5, another throwback series, classic fantasy, The Guardians of the Flame by Joel Rosenberg. There are 10 novels in this series. Now, disclaimer, I've only read the first 7 because when I read them, that's all there was, and it seemed like it was over. There was a clear ending point there. But there are 3 more books I've discovered, which maybe I'll get around to. I have them on my TBR to reread this series and finish it at some point. It's not going to happen in 2024. But I loved this when I first found it. I read it back in college. The setting starts with characters in college who are playing Dungeons and Dragons and get sucked into a D&D world for real. And all that follows. It's just a great premise. There have been things that have copied it since, but this is where it started. And it grabs you right away. Wow. Again, read the first couple chapters. You'll know exactly what I mean. And you won't put the book or series down either. All right. Number 4. And I've got 4 left. These are all big time ones that lots of people love, and a lot of you are going to completely agree with me on. Number 4 is Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. The Harry Potter series, 7 novels. There are various spin-off books. You don't need any of them, but these 7, man, I lived through the day where they were dropping year after year, and I couldn't get them fast enough. I would try to buy them right away the day they came out, and I would power through that book. Then I would turn around and read it to the family. So Zach first heard Harry Potter sitting on my lap. And there's some great memories with that. The books were written really well. Technically, they count as young adult, YA, but adults enjoy these books too. Heck, I know Spencer over at the Fantasy Files didn't read them until he was an adult, and you can find his reactions on his channel now. We do have an episode way back here on our channel talking about the Harry Potter series. Zach brought a friend on, a super Potter fan, and we had a good time. You can look for that if you like. It's worth listening to. But yeah, Harry Potter from book 1, fascinating, great story. You want to know what's going to happen to Harry and his friends and the bad stuff that's out there. When's it going to come back?
Now, this one isn't really fair because I was sold before I read the first page. It's The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge Cosmere fan. So at this point, it didn't really matter. I was putting these off to get to eventually. I read pretty much everything else in the Cosmere to prepare for this, hoping for a book to come out. But when I started actually reading it, read the first page, kept going, I was very pleasantly not surprised. It lived up to the expectations I wanted. We saw some really cool, interesting, dynamic action sequences, and then moved to more introspective moments and very just epic proportions of a story that still seemed character driven. And I'm very happy to say that I'm eagerly awaiting the next book still.
So you heard Zach's number 3. I thought about putting Stormlight Archive on. The problem is I struggled with book 1. So I love the Stormlight Archive. I look forward to rereading it this year, but it did not grab me by book 1. Nevertheless, fantastic series, so I stuck it in here at number 3. But number 2 is one Zach would not agree with, but he's wrong from my perspective, and that's Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files. I fell in love with this series right away at book 1. Others are like, oh, there's things a little cringy and stuff. I never felt that way. I'm sorry. It's written, I guess, to people like me, and it's a terrific series. There are 17 novels out now and many short stories and novellas. I've read them all, and I look forward to more books coming out in this series. We're going to get 7 or 8 more, according to Jim Butcher, when he gets around to them. And he's not old like George R.R. Martin, so I am hopeful we will get this series eventually. Just keep them coming, Jim. These books are so entertaining. And finally, number 1. It probably shouldn't be a surprise if you've been a subscriber to our channel. It's The Wheel of Time, people, by Robert Jordan. And yes, completed with the help of Brandon Sanderson, using Robert Jordan's notes after he passed away. So there's 14 novels and 1 prequel. I found this series early on, I think when there were only 4 books out, powered right through them, and then started waiting. And because I'd have to wait for the next book, that's where I started rereading. So I would reread every time a new book was coming out, the whole series. So I've internalized a lot of The Wheel of Time. Right away from book 1, I knew I had found a fantasy world I could get with, and I could spend a lot of time with. It's wonderful. It's warm. It's fantastic. It's got great characters, entertaining communication or lack thereof, the ties they have with each other, the overall story that's going on, the mysteries that are revealed, on and on. I could talk about The Wheel of Time, but you probably already love it since you're watching this. If you don't, well, there are people that it's just not their thing. It's definitely mine. All right, that's what I have for you today. Again, if you enjoyed this, let us know. Put your comments down into the show notes. If there's anything you think should have been up here in a top 20, let us know your experience. If you totally disagree with any of these, we'll take that too. We love any and all comments. We hope you will like the episode and, oh, I guess it's over here. Like the episode and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.